What's up, everybody? How's it going? It's Corey, and this is The War Within. Today, I will be shooting a solo cast, as I'd like to get a few things off my chest and talk about a specific topic that I'm going to try to tackle to the best of my ability. And it's a pretty serious topic. As of late, I've been seeing a lot of just craziness going on. I don't know if you guys have noticed that, but it just seems like everyone's at each other's throats over whatever. There's this real push for these ideological philosophies that get pushed onto other people about, whether it be nationalism or communism or socialism or what we're going to talk about today, sexism. So, yeah, I want to talk about sexism today. Some people might be scratching their noggins and saying, hey, man, what the hell does sexism have to do with the war within? Well, to give you guys a little preview into my mind, I think that everything ties into the war within, and I think that's this whole idea and concept, and I guess even debate about sexism ties directly into the war within. So my ladies out there, if I have any lady listeners, let's not get those panties too rustled just yet. I have some cases, I guess, where I can understand and get into it. I'm not completely going to just bash people, but what I want to talk about is where is this anger coming from, and where is this ideology coming from? And I was kind of just getting to it as far as it coming from a place of anger. I'm not a huge proponent on anger ever really being a fuel or a motivation for really doing anything in life. Anger leads to the dark side. So that's what I like to talk about is, darkness and light and integration. So let's talk about where I'm at today. So I am a college student. I'm a sophomore, about to finish up my sophomore year here. And I am just lambasted with the whole feminist / sexist kind of new age, new wave, neo-Marxist kind of philosophy in the school system right now. And to be quite honest with you, I'm a little sick of it. I see a lot of contradictions that are going on, and I'm here to call it out in a way because, hey, we got to have a conversation. That is in no way, shape, or form either, and I hate to be Mr. Caveat here, but that is no way, shape, or form me saying that I think that we should stick to an old school style of barbaric sexism that was prevalent. However, I think nowadays we are selling ourselves a bit of bad goods if we're going to sit here and continue to say that sexism is live and well. I think it's a philosophy, and I think it's a movement that was already pretty much tackled, much like we see today with the civil rights. I think that everyone has their own rights and that no one is really truly oppressed, but we are just buying into a state of victimhood. Because what does it do? Buying into any type of these cultural or racial or whatever communities where we allow identity politics to rule, all it comes down to is the ability for one to belong to a group so that they could strive for a higher strata and power. If you don't believe me, like I said, we're going to talk about sexism today, and I'll explain to you exactly how and why I believe this. If you look at the actual definition of the word sexism, this is what got me into it earlier. You see prejudice, stereotyping, or discrimination, typically against women, on the basis of sex. I'm sure if we were to type that in 1970 when the definition was possibly created, it probably would have read something just like prejudice, stereotyping, or discrimination on the basis of sex. That's the first issue I have right now with today's new age methodologies and belief systems. In my class the other day in arguing sexism or talking about sexism, I saw this definition pop up where it shows the distinct definition as typically against women. And I asked my professor, I said, hey, when defining a word, why does it have such a biased standpoint within it? And his explanation was that it's good to put that kind of, distinction within the definition of the word to just show exactly the plight that women have faced over the centuries and just how much power needs to be put into understanding sexism so that we have to change this. And in my thinking and understanding exactly what the definition of a word is, the definition of a word is supposed to show the root of what the meaning is behind the word. And it is never supposed to throw in there the ideology of any type of movement, political, religious, or anything of the sort. Yet here we have this being stated. And, for me personally, I had to put my foot down on it, and I had to say something about this, because what it comes down to is you see power grabs now formulating when it comes to any ideology. And because this is a noble ideology, we're now able to, and we should, change definitions in order to promote the ideology. I can't agree with that. I can't agree with changing something in order to make it so that we fix this problem. Because where do we stop after this? And I'm going down the road here that I'm wanting to get into later on. But I just wanted you guys to chew on the understanding as to why I would push back against this. Because it's not a fair technique to utilize. It makes you no better than a totalitarian or an authoritarian when doing so. This isn't making it a noble cause. It's just using tools in order to manipulate your cause. So we'll get into that in a little bit. But the reason why I think it ties deeply into the war within is this. I don't think it's healthy. I don't think it's a healthy means to promote, health for women. To, one, make it institutionalized that women are victims. And then two, institutionalize and pretty much brainwash people into believing that if you're a man, you need to now become subordinate in order to allow women to no longer be oppressed. And two, I think it's a bad thing to do to women to teach them that they must be on attack constantly because they have been oppressed for so long as well. And what I mean by that is, like I said earlier, I don't think it's a fair thing to do to people to teach them to be angry and that every day of their life should be a form of activism. I don't think that's going to create healthy women, and I don't think it's going to create healthy men either through doing so. And I don't think it's going to garner or foster good relationships later on. So that's another reason why I want to push back against this definition in of itself alone. I'm not pushing necessarily against sexism. I do believe that there are some forms and versions still out there. But I don't know if I'm definitely a naturalist where I believe that there are rules within nature that provide guidance to us on how things should operate. And to go against that is pretty much going against our own nature. And I think that's why we're seeing such issues now with people not being able to identify with the sex of who they were born. And again, I think that ties into the war within, because I don't think it's a healthy thing for someone to go against what they truly are, what their nature is. I think that's a poor philosophy. I think that's a poor ideology. I think that's a poor way of telling people and showing people how to live this life, because life is already hard enough. But to go in there and just throw wrenches in the gears of like, oh, well, you can be whatever gender you so choose and all this other stuff. I don't think that's fair. I think that we need to start teaching people to be more accepting of who they are and start learning exactly who they are and appreciate who they are and what they've been given as far as how they were born, and to learn how to deal with themselves. And in doing so, we'd create a better world that way. So that's where essentially I'm going with this, because I think we would be lying to ourselves if we didn't see that, or we didn't talk about the fact that with this whole sexism feminist movement, what we're really seeing is a vibe for power, right? So in essence, I equate the changing of the definition or creating this definition as totalitarian or authoritarian. And I'm not lying about that. I truly believe that. I think that women are becoming militant in this mindset. And I think they have their eye on this prize of believing that they need to completely dominate men and reverse the roles in order for society to be okay. And I believe that women believe that as well, because I think that women think that they're morally superior, because of the fact that they can't rape, or they in positions of power wouldn't be susceptible to sexually assault or sexually harass or sexually accost and use their power for sexual favors or sexual prowesses. So I think that's rooted somewhat within the feminist ideals as to why they think they would be better off in these positions. But I think that going into the phrase of like, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely, I think that this mindset of being able to utilize systems and change definitions and use these kind of subjective debates, I think it only goes to show just how far women are really willing to go to tip the power scales. And to be honest with you, I don't think that's healthy. And it's not me. I'm not trying to be sexist in my own right and stand on this toxic masculine pedestal. But I'm just wanting to point out the fact that if you truly were morally superior, why go about utilizing tactics such as these of subverting definitions and subverting institutions into believing that we need to change ideologies in order to show how poor or how poorly women have been treated in order to ultimately put women into positions of power and authority within systematic structures. Does it make any sense? So what I mean by this is what you're doing right now is you're utilizing institutions and systems to create systems that make it so that women are seen as victims, and thus it's subverting men into believing that we need to give power over to women. So in essence, what you're doing is the exact definition of sexism, because what you're trying to do is promote one sex as a superior sex and one as an inferior sex. So I don't believe that this mindset of promoting sexism is healthy for women, because it's not morally superior. And I think it teaches women to believe that there's always going to be some type of institution or system out there that they need to fight against. And in reality, what we need to be teaching people is to be just morally superior individuals. So it's much like with this movement, like what I'm talking about, instead of teaching people to become morally superior, you're just teaching people to get ahead. And you're teaching them that ultimately having power is the goal. So that having power then reverses the role so that women are no longer oppressed, right? So instead of teaching an individual to just be morally superior, you're now teaching them to belong to this group, this collectivist group, and that's where the power comes from as well. And I think ultimately what we'll end up seeing too is within this collectivist group, it's going to become people vying for individual power, but they used this kind of subversion in order to create pretty much the pyramid, creating the base, putting people in there as their warriors, and then once they have that enemy removed, now they can start to claw and fight and climb their way to the top of the pyramid, so that there's one supreme female leader who's in charge of all the rest. And the reason why I push back against this as well is it's much like I push back against every other in a way institution or ideology that's been before our time. And it's because ultimately, I think we're at a stage right now in human development where we're trying to evolve. And as I see these types of ideologies being pushed onto other people, I still see the same exact flaws that are the flaws within the ideologies of the past. So needless to say, what's going to end up happening is, if we do see a reversal of roles, we're still going to see corrupt leaders. We're still going to see people who are morally inept at the top. And it's not going to be a better living style or a better living situation for anyone in the future. We would have just reversed the roles. We wouldn't have learned any lessons from our history or from our past. So in a way too, I sit here and I say to women who want to buy into this, like, look into this, look into it, and really truly decide if you just want to create more of the same, but just with a different mask or a different gender at the helm of this movement. That's not to say that I don't believe that there are issues within the male aspects of our society. And that's, to be honest with you, that's, as you can see by what I'm trying to do with this podcast, that's ultimately what I'm trying to do. Is I'm trying to put into effect certain things early on where I saw masculinity within our society take a wrong turn to adopt immoral acts and immoral principles, and to reduce ethics down to just, hey, I have the big stick and I'm in charge now. So for me, that's the thing that I'm trying to do with masculinity, is figure out ways to speak to men so much so that we don't buy into these, like I said, immoral directions. And the reason why I bring this up to females necessarily is because going down this path is ultimately going to be exactly what males have been for the last however many years or centuries or millennia. So I ask you to really take a deep look into understanding these types of power grabs and the subversion, and in the effort to try to raise women up in this power threshold. I think we'd be better off to teach better morals and ethics at an individual level, like I said, than trying to continue to have people become activists and fight against systems. I think the best way to take down the system is to just be a better individual. I also want to say that I think this institutional pushing of this subversive style of promoting sexism and feminism in school today, I don't think it's good for men either. And I'll give you a case in point, because I was a little bit disappointed today when in class, my professor man, I feel terrible. I feel terrible listening to this guy, because the way I look at it is like I look at like a neutered man who is completely and utterly embarrassed of being a man. And I don't think that's a fair thing, because like I said in the beginning, he was born a man, but he's belonged to such crazy institutions that have pretty much made him, in a way, hate his existence. And he's been like, it's almost like listening to a Stockholm Syndrome individual who like completely loves their captor. Because he said in like a case in point today, not only when I pushed back against this understanding of a definition of a word that's pushing an ideology, which he so vehemently defended, which I thought was a little scary. The fact that he was willing to, in his own words, it's okay to change the definition of this word in order to push the agenda, because these oppressed people are so oppressed that we need to change definitions of words in order to promote their cause. That's scary, right? That's totalitarian in of itself. You know what I'm saying? That's tyrannical in of itself. But then today, he mentioned to the entire class that he took this test that Harvard put out that equated him as being mildly sexist, even though he openly admitted to the remainder of the class that every waking moment, listen to me here, this is crazy. Every waking moment of his consciousness, of when he's going about his day, he is solely thinking about how much he promulgates and how much he propagates sexist ideals. So him being a male, all he's thinking about now is doing things that will not be considered sexist to the opposite sex. And we know that this list is completely subjective. So in a way, like I said, this dude, he doesn't exist. He exists only to prove his identity to other people that he is an ally, and he doesn't do things in order to like I said, to propagate this crazy ideology. How can one go about living that way? And I bring this up to anyone. I bring this up to people because if you sit there and you agree with his characteristics, his behavior, that's sick. This person is so fanatical about this idea that he has literally controlled almost every behavior. And even then, what he admits is that even in taking this test, this Harvard study, he's still considered mildly sexist. So in of itself, he, just being born a man, is wrong. Everything that he's doing now is wrong or bad. And you cannot have an ideology where that's the case. Because that is no better than being a KKK member. That is no better than being Hitler, right? Who believed that the Jews were an inferior race. Or the KKK who hate Jews or blacks or gays, right? So now we have another ideology that's popping up, hiding in the ranks as though it's this, omniscient, benevolent fucking ideology. But in reality, what it's doing is it's causing men to believe that they are inferior and that they are originally broken, that everything that they do is just bad and wrong. So I don't see how this is a healthy thing for men, and I don't see how it's a healthy thing for women. So with that case, how is this going to produce a better society? And that's a question I want to be asked out there. How is promoting more of this belief system, which is just steeped in activism and, like I said, it's a subversive ideology. How is this better for society? Well, some people would say, we're educating people on the awareness that through history we've oppressed a certain gender, and what's being said within my classes is that this is universal, that sexism is a universal thing, and that we need to become more aware of it, and we need to figure out ways in order to promote to society ways of equality. But my question is to you, how? And that was a question that was asked when talking about chivalry. Should we get rid of chivalry completely? What should we do? And to no avail, there's never any answer. But I'll tell you what I believe the answer is. I believe that it's that men are ultimately supposed to just step down, turn over power roles, and ultimately, like what we hear with a lot of third wave feminists, that men should just die. Men should just go away. And I think that's what we're seeing when it comes to a lot of this just asinine belief system. What it does come down to, though, and I guess what I can say is here. So I had to push back, like I said, against... I had to push back against the definition. And I had to push back against this definition because if we are to leave this definition in a book, and 50 years from now, let's say we've figured out the magic cure, right? And there is no sexism anymore within the world, which I think is bullhooky. I think that there's always going to be some form of racism, and I think that there's always going to be some form of sexism. There's always going to be some form of discrimination, no matter what. But I agree with the root cause, the beginning idea that we needed to bring to light that, sexism was a real thing and it was institutionalized in the beginning. But I no longer agree with that it's still a thing. I think, as a matter of fact, it's the reverse, and I don't think it's a healthy thing to go about choosing someone for a job just off of having the image of, oh, look, I'm not sexist. It's not a morally superior thing to take, or a morally superior road to take. Hey, look, world, I'm not sexist because I hired 2 women, even though I had 3 men that were far more qualified and probably would have fit better with the motif that I have going on here. So I don't think that's healthy. But let's say, anyway, going back, I think that there is always going to be some form of sexism, but I think that we can make dents in the direction that we're going. But I think in looking back, if my children or my grandchildren were to read the definition in sexism, and let's say that we've already kind of tackled it, I don't think it's fair. I don't think it's right And yeah, I just don't think it's a right thing to do to start defining words to promote ideologies. Words should be defined based off of their root of what they really truly are. Okay, so I don't think it's a wise decision looking into the future to have definitions or ideologies steeped in these kinds of divisive types of tactics, because it's not going to teach our future generation in a proper manner. You have to forego your mission right now, right, of your attack against these institutions. And you have to realize that down the road that these types of behaviors will have implications. And that, let's say we live in like a more utopian society where someone's like, well, why does this definition have some form of prejudice or bias within it? And it's like, oh, well, just to let you know, Johnny, during this time, we felt that women's struggles were just so imperative that we had to that's not how you go about doing business. We have to lay some sort of foundation that has no bias in it, something that's morally and ethically superior, and changing this definition like such, just like the definition of fascism just got recently changed, and the definition of racism changed too a little while ago. We can't be doing that for our future. We need to have a solid foundation based in objective truths. And I think that's where we will find the solution as well for how to go about our future. Do I think that we should completely absolve ourselves and say, oh, there's no such thing as sexism, or that never happened? No, I don't think that's a very fair thing. I think that should be a topic of conversation going forward. But I think that we are making some serious strides in the world today as far as teaching people about these kinds of underlying bigotries and prejudices and such, and that people are actually making a good cause, or making a good effort to try to seek within themselves how and why they may possess these things. And that ultimately comes down to the solution. The solution is to create institutions for education where we focus on honing the individual into finding these belief systems deep within themselves and then trying to justify it to themselves. So we have mentors and people who help guide their critical thinking as to their belief systems, and then being able to shoot holes and poke holes in these belief systems so that people can ultimately learn why they hold these beliefs. And that way we will no longer, as a society, because if this is a societal thing where we have this type of education, we will then flush out the root cause. The root cause as to why someone would obtain or hold on to these inferior belief systems. And we don't have that. So that's what I think we should be striving for ultimately. And that's why I'm such a believer in philosophy. And that's why I think that it should be brought into the curriculum very early on, so that we can teach people how to formulate beliefs instead of teaching them what to believe. And that's ultimately one of my greatest messages for the war within, and for just life in general. And the direction that we need to see ourselves going in the future is we need to start teaching people how to think, not what to think. And this ideology, this belief system within sexism, or I'm completely anti-religion as well. We need to absolve that and get rid of those types of mindsets, because that's really truly where the oppression comes in. If you really want to fight systematic oppression, we need to fight the systems of our schooling and how we are being taught what we're being taught, and how we're formulating our belief systems, and how our brains are being cultivated into these types of oppressive kind of schemes, right? And I don't mean to sound Mr. Activist right now, but really what it comes down to is people are just being told what to believe, and they don't understand how or why they got there. And we also are not learning from our history of our past, and learning that these types of belief systems previously have been around, and that they're just going to repeat themselves, and it's only going to result in more and more pain. So, just to wrap this completely up here, I wanted to highlight how sexism in of itself and the new age, new wave belief system in subverting definitions in order to create its own institution and system to vie for power is a very unhealthy way, not just for women, but also for men and the relationship, because we must all coexist on this planet together. How this is not a good way. It's just going to create more of the same. It's going to create another power structure that's going to be oppressive and tyrannical to one group of individuals. I feel like I've proved, or at least brought up to the point, that this is not, and promoting this kind of ideology is not a good way to fix civilization, and that it's going to probably produce a poorer society. And I think that I've promoted something, in a way, if you really want to truly deeply think about it, a means to produce a better society. And that's through fixing our school system, bringing back humanities, teaching people how to think, not what to think. And also teaching people to live on an individual basis, live off of their own merits, and to just become better and moral human beings at the individual level. And I think that would ultimately start to build the foundation for the ideals within a newer society. And that's something that a society would ultimately adopt based off of just the individual level. So, tying into the war within as well, I think that, the struggle for power is always this, it's always this dark and twisted, shadowy type of thing where people are unaware truly of their underlying motivations. And people are very willing to hide behind this altruistic type of, ideology. People believe that this is the morally superior route. But in reality, if you tear it down inch by inch and look at it, you're really seeing some really unethical methods of promoting this type of belief system. And anytime you have something that is built off of those types of morals, it is never going to be good for anyone. So I ask you all to really search your souls when reviewing this topic. Ask yourselves the hard questions, dig deep, and see where your motivations truly lie. And then also question my ideas and what I think is correct. And hey, I love to have a little banter back and forth. So please feel free to come at me, but come at me with reason. Don't come at me just to attack me. Come at me with reason. Give me some good ideas. Give me some good counterpoints, and let me know where I have flaws too. I can't grow unless people point out where I'm screwed up. So take care. Corey out.